Hey there! Welcome at the YouTube channel Combating Insomnia. So you want to know more about ancient Egypt and fall asleep? That's awesome. Why? Because you're about to step into one of the most jaw-dropping, mysterious, and totally fascinating places in human history. I mean, come on, pyramids, mummies, secret tombs, golden masks, it's like a real-life movie, but even crazier. Now, here's what I think. When people hear Egypt, they usually picture the Great Pyramid, maybe Cleopatra, or those huge statues with cobra crowns. Right? But guess what? That's just scratching the surface. Egypt's history is massive. We're talking thousands of years. Like, more than 5,000 years of drama, invention, art, war, love stories, betrayals, you name it, they had it. You won't believe this, but the ancient Egyptians were building temples and writing stuff down way before Rome was even a thing. Actually, they had a full-blown civilization when most of the world was still figuring out how to plant crops. Can you imagine that? So yeah, Egypt isn't just old. It's ancient. Let me tell you something. Egypt wasn't just some dusty old kingdom in the desert. Nope. It was one of the first major civilizations in human history. Think about that for a second. The first real cities, the first writing systems, the first central governments. Egypt was doing it all before it was cool. And a big part of that is thanks to one very special river, the Nile. Yep. The Nile River is the literal lifeline of Egypt. Every year, like clockwork, it would flood. That flood would leave behind super-rich soil, perfect for growing crops. So, while other parts of the world were struggling with dry dirt or jungle, Egypt had this nice, clean, dependable food source. That meant people could settle down, stop hunting 24/7, and start building, well, everything. Imagine you're living 6,000 years ago. You don't have supermarkets. No Uber Eats. If you can't grow it, you don't eat it. But in Egypt, thanks to the Nile, people had food security. That means they had free time. And what do humans do with free time? They get creative. They build pyramids. They invent writing. They come up with wild stories about gods with crocodile heads. What do you think you'd do with that kind of time? Let's be real. Egypt knew how to make an entrance. Their art? Gorgeous. Their buildings? Epic. Their fashion? Seriously stylish, even by today's standards. I mean, have you seen those linen robes and eyeliner looks? Iconic in their stories? They didn't mess around. Gods fighting chaos, people being judged in the afterlife, talking animals, magical scrolls. It's like a Netflix series waiting to happen. But wait, it gets better. They weren't just dreamers. They were super practical too. They invented paper from papyrus, had detailed medicine books, built massive temples without bulldozers, and even figured out 365-day calendars. Yep. The same number of days we use today. Pretty cool, right? So when we say ancient Egypt, we're not talking about a bunch of people sitting around in loincloths. We're talking scientists, architects, artists, and priests who basically set the stage for modern civilization. Now, let's talk about the Pharaohs. These were the rulers of Egypt, and man, they were something else. They weren't just kings or queens. Nope. The Egyptians thought their pharaohs were actual gods on earth. Like, part human, part divine. No pressure, right? These pharaohs were in charge of everything. Religion, politics, military, construction, you name it. If the Nile didn't flood properly one year, people would be like, did the pharaoh forget to please the gods? That's the level of responsibility we're talking about. Some pharaohs were super chill and focused on building temples. Others went full warlord and expanded Egypt's borders. And of course, a few left behind some really suspicious death stories. We'll get to that later. You'll hear more about famous ones like Ramses the Great, Hatshepsut, and Tutankhamun. But trust me, even the lesser-known ones have wild stories. Now let's talk about something that really sets Egypt apart, death. I know, that sounds creepy. But honestly, the ancient Egyptians were obsessed with the afterlife. Like, seriously obsessed. They believed that when you died, your soul had to go on this epic journey through the underworld. But you couldn't do that just by lying around. Nope, you needed your body preserved, your tomb packed with food, treasures, and spells, and a guidebook called the Book of the Dead. Oh yeah, and your heart? It got weighed against a feather to decide if you were good or bad. If your heart was heavier, well, let's just say there was a giant crocodile monster named Amit waiting to eat it. Yikes. So yeah, Egyptians took burial very seriously. And that's why they built those massive tombs and pyramids. They weren't just showing off, they were prepping for forever. Can you imagine planning your whole life around what happens after you die? Here's the thing. As amazing as Egypt was, it wasn't always sunshine and sphinxes. There were invasions, civil wars, famines, crazy political drama. At one point, Egypt was ruled by foreign kings for a few centuries. Then came the Greeks, then the Romans, then the Arabs. Egypt was like the ultimate hot spot. Everyone wanted a piece of it, but somehow, through all of that, Egypt kept its identity. Its language, its art, its culture, it all left a mark. Even today, people around the world are still obsessed with it. Ever heard of the Curse of the Mummy? Or seen a pyramid in a music video? Yeah, Egypt's still influencing us.so. Why should you care? Why are we still telling stories about people who lived 5,000 years ago? Simple, because they matter. Egypt was one of the first times humans looked at chaos and said, let's make order out of this. They figured out farming, cities, laws, religion, and art, all in one go. They showed us that humans are capable of doing incredible things when they work together, think big, and dream even bigger. Plus, their stories are just insanely cool. Seriously, once we get into the details, how they built pyramids with zero machines, how they wrote in secret picture languages, how their queens ruled empires and their kids became gods, it's impossible not to be amazed. And that's exactly what we're going to explore in this series, because Egypt isn't just a chapter in a textbook. It's a living, breathing mystery that still hasn't revealed all its secrets. Some tombs are still hidden. Some scrolls are still untranslated. And who knows what's buried beneath the sand. Now that we've dipped our toes into Egypt's epicness, it's time to go way back. Back to when it all started. Before the pyramids. Before the pharaohs. Even before the cities. We're diving into the mysterious world of prehistoric Egypt. What was life like before kings and kingdoms? How did people survive? And how did the Nile shape one of the greatest civilizations ever? Spoiler alert, it's way more interesting than you'd think. Stick around. This is going to be a wild ride. Alright, so we already dipped our toes into the greatness of ancient Egypt, the pyramids, pharaohs, gods, all that good stuff. But guess what? Egypt didn't just pop into existence one day with people stacking stones into giant triangles. Nope. Before all the big temples and shiny golden coffins, Egypt was wild. Literally. No cities. No writing. No pharaohs walking around in leopard skin capes. Just small groups of people living along the Nile, trying to survive. So, let's rewind. Like, way back that we're talking 6,000 to 10,000 years ago. Yeah. That far. Imagine this. You're standing in the Nile Valley. It's hot. Like, scorching. There's no air conditioning, no clean water coming out of a tap, and absolutely zero Wi-Fi. No TikTok. No playlists. No coffee shops, just sand, wild animals, and a long, muddy river. Sound rough? Oh, it was. People back then weren't chilling in palaces. They were hunting, gathering, fishing, and slowly learning how to grow crops. It was all about survival. Every single day, and let's be honest, most of us wouldn't make it. Here's what I think. If you dropped a modern person into prehistoric Egypt, they'd be lost in under 5 minutes. No bug spray. No GPS. No sunscreen. No Google to answer, is this berry poisonous? You'd be like, what do I even eat? And the answer would probably be, whatever you can catch or dig up. Good luck. Can you imagine trying to make a fire from scratch? Or sleep on the ground with wild jackals howling nearby? Yeah, we're not built for that anymore. Before the big temples and mummies, Egypt was full of small communities. Villages, really. People lived in huts made of mud and reeds. They followed the rhythms of the Nile. When it flooded, they farmed. When it dried up, they moved or hunted. They weren't Egyptians yet. Not in the way we think of them. But they were becoming Egyptian. See, this is the cool part. These early folks were already doing things that would later become totally Egyptian. Like burying their dead with care. That means they believed in something after death. Decorating pottery. Yep, the first ancient Egyptian art shows up here. Using stone tools and weapons. Not fancy, but sharp and very effective. Farming with the Nile. The whole civilization later builds off this. So yeah, they were laying the foundation for greatness. Slowly. Carefully. Step by step. Yep. Cows, goats, sheep, and even pigs. Around 5000 BCE, Egypt entered what's called the Neolithic period, which basically means New Stone Age. People started farming. They domesticated animals. And for the first time, they didn't need to constantly chase food around. Which was a big deal. You settle down, you build a house, you grow stuff, you finally have time to think about things other than what's for dinner. This is when we start seeing the first real villages. Not cities, but more than just camps. They were made of mud brick homes, with basic tools, granaries to store food, and even early trade with other groups nearby. And get this, they were already experimenting with makeup and jewelry. Even before the pharaohs, Egyptians knew how to look good. So, yeah. Farming changed everything. It gave people time to create culture. Now we gotta talk about the Nile again. Because seriously, without the Nile, there would be no Egypt. This river was the real star of the show. It floods every year. Like clockwork. It brings fresh, black silt, rich soil perfect for farming. That's why ancient Egyptians called their land Kemet, which means black land. It was a shout out to the dark soil the river left behind. Can you imagine how lucky that is? In the middle of the desert, you've got this one strip of green paradise where everything grows. So, what did people do? They settled there. They built their lives around it. They learned to track the floods using stars. That's actually how the Egyptian calendar started, and over time, small villages popped up all along the Nile. Eventually, these would grow into city-states. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Now, don't get too romantic about it. Life in prehistoric Egypt was rough. I mean, really rough. There were no doctors. You got sick? Good luck. Got a toothache? Too bad. Hope you like pain. Injured by a wild animal? Well, that's probably it for you. Even childbirth was dangerous. Most people didn't live past 35. Also, this was the desert. So food wasn't always easy to come by. One bad flood and your whole harvest could fail. Famine was a real threat. That's why early communities often fought with each other. Not for fun, but for water, land, and food. So yeah. If you're thinking, I could totally live back then. Let me just say, there was no Netflix and chill. It was just heat and survive. But despite all that, humans thrived here. They learned, adapted, and slowly built a culture that would blow the rest of the world's mind. Okay, now we're getting into the fun part. As time went on, some prehistoric cultures in Egypt started standing out. Two of the big ones? Badari and Naqada. Let's break them down super quick. The Badari, around 4500 BCE. Lived in Upper Egypt, south part of the Nile. Famous for their beautiful pottery and early farming. Already had burial rituals, people buried with items like tools and beads. The Naqada, around 4000 to 3000 BCE. These guys took it to the next level. They had big, organized settlements. Tons of art, symbols, trade with other regions, and even early writing systems. Naqada people were basically the prototype Egyptians. If ancient Egypt were a movie, the Naqada folks were the writers, directors, and set designers. And here's the wild part, by the end of the Naqada period, we start seeing kings. Yep. Early rulers. Not full pharaohs yet, but definitely people in charge. They wore crowns, carried staffs, and got buried in tombs with treasures. So yeah. Egypt was slowly transforming, from small villages to big powerhouses. From hunters and farmers to artists and priests. The stage was set for greatness. Okay, let's get real again. Why wouldn't we make it in this world? Let's list it out. No electricity. Want to charge your phone? Too bad. You have fire, and that's it. No running water. You have to walk miles with a jar on your head. No medicine. Got a cold? Or a broken bone? You're toast. Insects everywhere. And I mean everywhere. No bug spray, remember? Animals want to eat you. Crocodiles, snakes, jackals, oh my. You work non-stop. Farming. Digging. Hauling water. Hunting. There's no weekend. Sand in everything. Your shoes. Your clothes. Your mouth. Constant sand. You be barefoot or wearing sandals made of reeds. Spoiler, not comfy. So yeah. We love to look at ancient Egypt. But live there, I'm good, thanks. Still, we owe a lot to these early people. They built the foundation. Without them, there'd be no pyramids. No pharaohs. No Cleopatra. No mummies in museums. They were the unsung heroes of Egypt's story. Next comes the real turning point. People started uniting. Small kingdoms merged. A few powerful leaders rose up. The north and the south of Egypt, Upper and Lower Egypt, eventually became one. And then came the very first pharaoh. His name? Narmer. Or maybe Menes. History's a little fuzzy on that one. But either way, he changed the game. We'll dive into all of that in the next section. How Egypt became Egypt. With crowns, kingdoms, temples, and kings who called themselves gods. Okay, so far we've hung out with some prehistoric villagers, dodged crocodiles, and barely made it through life without bug spray. Brutal, right? But now things are getting serious. We're about to witness one of the biggest glow-ups in history. Like, full transformation, small villages? Gone. Scattered tribes? Not anymore. Now it's time for unification, that's right. Egypt is about to become a full-blown civilization. With a king. With crowns. With laws, armies, palaces, the whole 9 yards. So, what exactly happened? Upper Egypt versus Lower Egypt. Wait, there were two. Yep. Before it became one big country, Egypt was basically split into 2 regions. Upper Egypt, in the south. I know, confusing, but it's called that because it's upstream on the Nile. Lower Egypt, in the north, near the Nile Delta, where the river fans out into the Mediterranean. So yeah, upside-down Egypt, basically. Each area had its own rulers, symbols, customs, even gods. Upper Egypt had a white crown. Lower Egypt had a red one. And no, they weren't exactly BFFs. These 2 regions were like rival teams. Think of it like a super ancient version of Marvel versus DC. Or iPhone versus Android. Always competing, always trying to one-up each other. But here's where it gets interesting. This guy, Narmer, is a total mystery and a legend rolled into one. Historians are still arguing about whether his name was Narmer, Menes, or if they were the same person. Nobody really knows for sure. But what we do know is this: he united Egypt, he literally took 2 separate kingdoms and squished them into one giant superpowered, no easy task. You won't believe this, but Narmer's big moment is actually carved into a giant stone palette. It's called the Narmer Palette, and it's basically the oldest political cartoon in history. Picture this: one side shows Narmer wearing the white crown of Upper Egypt, bashing an enemy's head. Casual. The other side? He's got the red crown of Lower Egypt. The message? I run both now. Deal with it. Pretty savage. This is around 3100 before the Common Era, by the way. That's 5000 plus years ago. And people were already into PR and political branding. Crazy, right? Now, this is huge. What Narmer, or Menes, pulled off was the first known unification of a country in world history, and no other place on Earth had done this before. Egypt wasn't just a bunch of city-states fighting each other anymore. It was one kingdom, ruled by one leader. Honestly, can you imagine how complicated that must have been? Different people, different customs, different gods, different dialects. And Narmer somehow managed to bring everyone together under one rule. And how did he do it? With force, yes. But also with symbols. He created this idea of a double crown that combined both Upper and Lower Egypt's crowns. Red plus white equals unity. Pretty smart move, and he started calling himself King of the Two Lands. It wasn't just politics. It was a whole rebranding campaign. So here's the real twist. Narmer wasn't just a guy with a crown. He wasn't like some president or mayor, he was a pharaoh. And in ancient Egypt, that meant something way bigger than ruler. Pharaohs were believed to be living gods, yep. Actual gods walking around on earth. They were seen as the middleman between humans and the gods. So if you wanted the Nile to flood properly or avoid a drought, you better hope the pharaoh was doing his job. Can you imagine having that kind of pressure? Like, sorry the crops failed, it's probably your fault, king. But at the same time, pharaohs were treated like rock stars. Giant tombs, gold everything, statues everywhere. And this tradition all started with Narmer. What did unification change? Pretty much everything. Once Egypt was united, life shifted from small tribal villages to organized cities. Trade exploded. Writing started to spread. Massive building projects got underway. People finally had a central government. There were taxes, laws, and organized religion. Here's a quick list of what popped up after unification. Hieroglyphics, boom, written language. Scribes, people whose entire job was writing, a very big deal. Temples, not just huts, real buildings for worship. Taxes, yep, even ancient Egyptians had to pay up. Military, now that they were one kingdom, they needed to protect it. Oh, and here's the kicker, the first capital city of Egypt was called Memphis. Not Tennessee, this Memphis was located near the border between Upper and Lower Egypt. Smart move, kept everyone close to power. So now, Egypt isn't just surviving anymore. It's thriving. Once Narmer took charge, he kicked off something historians call the First Dynasty. It's the beginning of Egypt's official, royal timeline. From here on out, the pharaohs keep coming. One after another. Some boring. Some brilliant. Some total maniacs. They built tombs, fought wars, and kept expanding the kingdom. This period, from 3100 before the Common Era to about 2686 before the Common Era, is called the early dynastic period. Not super flashy, but super important. And here's a fun fact, one of the early kings, may have had over 300 servants buried with him. Yikes, that's how strong the belief in the afterlife was. People thought they'd need help in the next world, so they brought their staff with them. Creepy, but fascinating. Okay, let's pause for a second and appreciate what just happened. This unification moment, this rise of the first pharaohs, is why everything else about Egypt exists. The pyramids wouldn't have happened. The Valley of the Kings? Nope. Cleopatra, King Tut, Ramses? None of them without this first step. Before Narmer, there was just chaos and tribes. After Narmer, Egypt becomes a cultural juggernaut that lasts over 3,000 years. That's longer than almost any other civilization ever. So yeah, Narmer might not be a household name like Cleopatra or Tutankhamun, but he's the reason their stories exist in the first place. Pretty wild, right? Now I've gotta ask, do you think you could handle being a pharaoh? You'd have the power, sure. But you'd also have to command armies, make laws, keep the gods happy, keep the people from revolting. Oh, and build your own giant tomb before you die. No pressure, plus, if things went wrong, you wouldn't get voted out. You might get overthrown or disappeared. So, yeah, maybe we'll stick with our regular 9-to-5s. Now that Egypt's united and the first dynasties are rolling, it's time for the country to level up. The Old Kingdom, this is where things get massive. As in, pyramids. And not just any pyramids, the pyramids. Giza. Sphinx. The works, this is the golden age of architecture, art, and powerful pharaohs with insane building obsessions. So buckle up. Because next, we're climbing into the age of pyramid builders. Trust me, you're not going to want to miss it. Alright, folks, grab your time machines, because we're going back, way back. We've just seen how Narmer, aka Menes, pulled off the greatest political merger in history. 2 lands, 1 pharaoh. Boom! Now that Egypt's all united and ready to rock, we're entering a seriously epic chapter. It's called the Old Kingdom, and trust me, it's not old in a boring way. This is the age of innovation, glory, and the absolute obsession with building massive stone triangles. Yep, we're talking about the pyramids. You ready? Let's build. So, when was the Old Kingdom? We're looking at around 2686 to 2181 before the Common Era. That's over 4,600 years ago. This period is also known as the Age of the Pyramids. And for good reason, some of the most mind-blowing structures in human history were built during this time. Egypt was absolutely booming. We're talking strong central government, mega building projects, crazy wealth, and powerful kings who were treated like gods. Sounds intense? Oh, it totally was. Why build pyramids? Okay, let's address the elephant, or pyramid, in the room. Why did they build these colossal stone triangles in the first place? Simple answer, tombs. But not just throw some dirt on it, tombs. We're talking God-level afterlife real estate. You see, Egyptians didn't think life ended when you died. Nope. They believed in a full-on second life after death. And the pharaoh? He had to be prepared. So instead of just getting buried in a hole, the pharaoh got a pyramid to house his soul. Priceless treasures. Fancy furniture. Food, even in death, you gotta eat. And sometimes, servants. Yep, real people. Still creepy. The idea was, if you built the right tomb, you'd live forever. So basically, these pyramids were spiritual launch pads for the soul. Pretty cool, right? Let's talk about the OG pyramid guy, Pharaoh Djoser. This dude ruled in the 3rd dynasty, early in the Old Kingdom. Before him, pharaohs were buried in simple flat structures called mastabas. Kind of like giant benches made of mud brick. Functional, but not flashy. Then came Djoser, and he was like, nah. Let's go taller. So he called up his royal architect, Imhotep. Yes, that Imhotep, the one they made into a villain in the Mummy movie. Totally unfair, by the way. Imhotep had a crazy idea: let's stack the mastabas on top of each other. And boom, the step pyramid was born. It's still standing today at Saqqara. And it's the first large-scale stone structure in the world. Not just in Egypt, in the entire planet. Let that sink in. Now if you thought Djoser's pyramid was cool, just wait. Fast forward to the 4th dynasty, and here come the 3 goats of pyramid building. Sneferu, Khufu, Khafre. Let's break it down. Sneferu, the experimental dad, This guy was the king of trial and error. He built 3 major pyramids during his reign, trying to get the design just right. First, there was the Mitam Pyramid, but it kinda collapsed. Whoops! Next, he tried the Bent Pyramid. You can actually see where they messed up halfway. The angle changes. Looks like it's ducking its head. Finally, he nailed it with the Red Pyramid. Perfect slope, solid design, still standing strong. So yeah, Snefru basically invented the smooth-sided pyramid. Thanks, buddy, Khufu, the big boss of Giza, now we're talking. Khufu, Snefru's son, went all in and built the Great Pyramid of Giza. This thing is insane. Built with over 2 million limestone blocks. Each block weighs between 2 and 80 tons. The whole thing is over 480 feet tall. And he did all this without cranes, bulldozers, or laser levels. Just manpower. Logs. Ramps. And sheer determination. It took about 20 years to build and involved tens of thousands of workers. And here's something wild, we still don't know exactly how they built it. There are tons of theories, straight ramps, zigzag ramps, spiral ramps, but no one's 100% sure. It's one of the biggest mysteries in archaeology. Can you imagine doing all that with just stone tools? Khufu's pyramid is the only one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world still standing today. Next up, Khafre, Khufu's son. He built the second pyramid at Giza. It's slightly smaller, but it looks taller because he built it on higher ground. Sneaky move, Khafre. But what really sets him apart? The Great Sphinx. Yep, that massive lion body human head statue was probably built for Khafre. And fun fact, the Sphinx's face might actually be his face. The Sphinx is over 240 feet long and 66 feet tall. Carved from a single piece of limestone. Nobody knows exactly why it was made, though. Some think it's a guardian. Others think it's spiritual. One thing's for sure, it's iconic. Okay, let's zoom out a bit. What was life like for regular people while the pharaohs were building megatombs? Well, if you weren't royalty, life was pretty tough. Most people were farmers. They worked sunrise to sunset. Their homes were made of mud brick. No plumbing. No weekends. But during pyramid construction season, usually when the Nile flooded, farmers became workers. That's right, the pyramids weren't built by slaves like the movie show. Most evidence points to paid laborers, fed, housed, and organized by skill level. There were even work crews with team names like the Drunkards of Menkaure. Sounds like ancient frat houses. Here's the thing, none of this would have worked if Egyptians didn't deeply believe in the afterlife. Everything revolved around the gods. The sun god Ra became huge during this time. In fact, the pharaoh was seen as Ra's son. So, every pyramid wasn't just a tomb. It was a symbol of divine order. You can't just not build it. That would have been chaos. Like, spiritually dangerous. So, pyramid building wasn't just construction, it was worship. Now you'd think everything was going great, right? Strong rulers. Fancy tombs. Economy buzzing. But toward the end of the Old Kingdom, things start falling apart. Why? Long droughts equals less food equals angry people. The pharaohs kept building bigger tombs equals more taxes. Local governors, called nomarchs, started acting like mini-kings. And pharaohs just lost control. By the 6th dynasty, the government was weakening. The unity Narmer had created started to crack. Eventually, things got so messy that the Old Kingdom collapsed into a period of chaos. No central rule. No big pyramids. Just confusion. But don't worry, we're not done yet. So, why should we care about a bunch of giant stone triangles built thousands of years ago? Here's what I think. The Old Kingdom shows what humans can do when they're obsessed with legacy. It's not just about bricks. It's about belief, teamwork, vision, and a whole lot of sweat. These monuments still stand today, reminding us that we can build things that last millennia. And come on, who doesn't love a good pyramid? So, Egypt just hit a wall, literally and politically. Next, we're heading into a period called the First Intermediate Period. Sounds boring, right? But it's actually full of civil war, hunger, and comebacks. Think of it as Egypt's messy middle chapter. And trust me, the drama is real. Get ready for power struggles, regional chaos, and one heck of a royal rebound. Okay, so here's the deal. We've just seen Egypt in its golden age, pharaohs building jaw-dropping pyramids, everything's booming, people are getting paid to stack stones, and the gods are happy. But then, well, it all kind of fell apart. Yeah, Egypt hit its first major rough patch. We call this the First Intermediate Period, but let's be honest, that's just a fancy way of saying everything went sideways. You won't believe the chaos that went down during this time. It's like Egypt's version of a bad breakup. Everything that was working just stopped working. So, what happened? Let's rewind a bit. Near the end of the Old Kingdom, things were already starting to shake. For one, those massive pyramid projects? They weren't cheap. The government was bleeding money trying to outdo each pharaoh's tomb. Oh, your dad had a 400-foot pyramid? Cool, mine's 450. You get the idea. But it wasn't just about money. The Nile, which was Egypt's life source, literally their food factory, started acting up. Lower floods meant weaker crops. And weaker crops? That means less grain, higher prices, and a bunch of hungry, angry farmers. So now we've got food shortages, a broke government, and too many local leaders, called nomarchs, who started acting like they were kings of their own little areas. Basically, Egypt became a group project with no one leading. And as we all know, group projects without a leader are doomed. Pharaohs lost power. Like, seriously lost it. Nobody feared the crown anymore. The aura of the divine king? Poof! Gone. Instead, you had these regional governors doing whatever they wanted. It was like, who's in charge? Answer, depends where you live. So, Egypt split. The north, called Lower Egypt, was controlled by rulers in Heracleopolis. The south, Upper Egypt, had its own power center in Thebes. And between them? Constant tension. Think turf war, ancient style. For over 100 years, Egypt was just a hot mess. No great building projects. No giant monuments. No big pharaoh energy. Just a divided country struggling to figure itself out. But even in all this chaos, life went on. People still farmed their land, though with fewer resources and more stress. They still raised families, traded goods, and prayed to the gods, hoping for better days. One thing that's super interesting is how the art and writing of the time changed. You start seeing more emotional and personal stuff, people writing about hardship, hunger, and suffering. There's a famous piece called The Admonitions of the Pure that talks about society flipped upside down, poor people rising, rich people falling, and everything going completely bonkers. It's basically an ancient Egyptian end-of-the-world rant. Now let's talk about some of the actual players during this chaotic time. In the north, the Heracleopolitan kings ruled for a while. Guys like KDI, KD2, they tried to keep order, fix the economy, and bring back the good old days. And hey, credit where credit's due, they weren't just sitting around eating dates. They built fortifications, restructured provinces, and worked hard to keep their areas together. But they didn't have full control, and they knew it. Meanwhile, in the south, Theban leaders were rising up. They saw an opportunity. One name that really stands out is Intef, a Theban ruler who kicked off a local dynasty. He and his successors, also named Intef, because ancient Egyptians loved repeating names, started pushing north. Bit by bit, the southern kings gained ground. And honestly, they were smart about it. They didn't just fight, they built alliances, used religion, and spread the idea that they were restoring Ma'at, balance and order. Enter Mentuhotep II, the MVP of reunification. This guy wasn't just a warrior, he was a strategist. He spent years chipping away at northern control, winning battles, and promoting himself as the true heir of Egypt's ancient greatness. And then, around 2055 before the Common Era, he finally did it. He reunited Egypt. For the first time in over a century, there was one king, one throne, one country again. Cue the ancient confetti. Mentuhotep didn't just sit back and enjoy his win either. He got straight to work rebuilding Egypt's government, military, and infrastructure. He launched new temple projects, expanded trade routes, and made Thebes the new capital. This guy was on a mission. And it worked. Egypt entered what we now call the Middle Kingdom, an age of stability, intelligence, and renewal. But let's pause and think for a second. What would it be like to live through the first intermediate period? Honestly? Rough. No central power means less protection. If your area had a good governor, cool, you might do okay. But if not? Bandits, famine, political violence, it was like the ancient version of a failed state, and no offense, but most people today wouldn't last a week. We're used to systems working, most of the time. Groceries magically appear in stores. Police show up when you call. Hospitals are a thing. But back then? It was all on you. If the Nile didn't flood right, there might not be enough food to make it through the year. And if war broke out between rival regions? Good luck. You'd probably hear about it days late, no texts, no alerts, just rumors spreading through the market. Imagine being a farmer and waking up one day to see a whole army marching through your fields. Not exactly ideal. People had to be resourceful. Tough. Flexible. If you got sick, you hoped some herbs and prayers would fix it. If your town got raided, you either ran or fought. And yet, they made it. That's what blows my mind. Despite everything, economic collapse, civil war, climate issues, Egyptians survived. They adapted, adjusted, and found new ways to live. In some places, this period actually encouraged creativity. Smaller tombs popped up with more personal designs. Local artists took the spotlight. Even literature changed, it became more introspective, with stories and poems about justice, suffering, and wisdom. There's even a tale about a shipwrecked sailor who finds a magical island, basically the ancient version of a fantasy story. People still told tales. They still dreamed. So while the first intermediate period is often labeled as a dark age, it wasn't just darkness. It was also a time of resilience. People didn't just give up. They looked for light wherever they could. And then came the comeback. Mentuhotep II's reunification wasn't just a political win, it was a spiritual healing. It was a message that Egypt could fall, but it could rise again. That rise? It leads us right into the Middle Kingdom. We're about to dive into an era that's often underrated, but honestly, it's one of the most brilliant periods in ancient history. The Middle Kingdom brought back strong leadership, smarter policies, and a new kind of confidence. Pharaohs weren't just builders anymore, they were thinkers, diplomats, and organizers. We'll see literature reach new heights. Art become more refined. Trade routes extend farther than ever before. And we'll meet some pharaohs who were more brains than brawn. Sound good? Let's head into the Middle Kingdom, where order is restored, creativity flourishes, and Egypt starts thinking long-term again. Alright, so picture this. Egypt just survived its first major disaster. The kingdom broke apart, people starved, power shifted, and everything basically went off the rails. But somehow, they pulled it together. Like a good movie sequel, Egypt came back stronger, smarter, wiser. And that brings us into what's called the Middle Kingdom. Now I know, Middle Kingdom doesn't sound as flashy as Pyramid Era or Golden Age of Pharaohs. It sounds kind of meh. But trust me, this part of Egypt's story is criminally underrated. So let's talk about it. The Middle Kingdom starts around 2055 before the Common Era, when our guy Mentuhotep II from Thebes finally reunites the whole country. This wasn't just about being king again. It was about restoring Ma'at, balance, harmony, the whole cosmic order thing. And Mentuhotep? He didn't waste time. He built new temples, reorganized the government, and started healing the country like an ancient CEO on a mission. You could say he was the original fixer. After him, a new dynasty took the throne, this time with Amenemhati at the top. And this dude brought a whole new vibe. First thing he did? He moved the capital north, to a new city called Ichtoi. Why? Strategy. It was closer to the trade routes, gave better control of the country, and honestly, was just a smarter place to run the show from. It's like moving your HQ from a cool old building to a brand new high-rise downtown. But the thing that really sets the Middle Kingdom apart? The brains. These rulers weren't just flexing muscle, they were thinking long-term. They strengthened the borders. Sent military missions to Nubia to keep things in check. Built fortresses along the Nile. Created organized, centralized systems of control. In short, they learned from the mess of the first intermediate period. But it wasn't all just politics and power moves. The Middle Kingdom is when Egyptian literature really bloomed. People started writing stories, poems, letters, and even manuals on how to behave like a good official. One of the most famous works from this time is the Tale of Sinew. It's about this Egyptian official who runs away to live in a foreign land, has adventures, and eventually returns home, wiser and more humble. Kinda sounds like an ancient version of Eat, Pray, Love, right? But it's deeper than that. It reflects how Egyptians were thinking about identity, loyalty, and morality. For the first time, we get these very human, emotional themes showing up in writing. Can you imagine that? Ancient Egyptians writing with emotion, about fear, regret, even homesickness. It's like their inner world was finally coming out on paper. That's one reason the Middle Kingdom feels so modern. People weren't just building stuff, they were reflecting, learning, asking questions about life. You start to see the emergence of philosophy, in a way. Like, what does it mean to be good? How should a ruler lead? What's our place in the world? These are deep questions. And remember, this is 4,000 years ago. Meanwhile, art and architecture got a glow up too. Statues became more realistic. Temples had more elegance. Reliefs showed more detail, not just stiff-looking pharaohs, but scenes of everyday life. It wasn't all perfection and power anymore. It was real. Even tombs became more about who the person was, not just how rich they were. You'd see carvings of someone playing music, making beer, hanging with their family. It was like ancient Instagram.so. What made this all possible? Well, for one, the pharaohs of the Middle Kingdom were actually good at ruling. They weren't just figureheads. They managed people, budgets, laws, you name it. They even created a professional bureaucracy, a system with actual job titles, ranks, responsibilities. Like, you handle taxes. You manage grain. You keep those records neat. Before this, a lot of that stuff was passed down through family ties or done in a kind of figure-it-out-as-we-go way. But in the Middle Kingdom, it got serious. You had scribes trained in formal schools, clerks who documented every shipment, overseers managing labor teams, and of course, surprise, lots of paperwork. So yeah, if you love spreadsheets, the Middle Kingdom might have been your vibe. Also, trade was popping off. Egypt started flexing its influence abroad. They traded with the Levant, with Nubia, and even sent expeditions to the fabled land of Punt, somewhere in the Horn of Africa. We're talking incense, ebony, exotic animals, rich stuff. Egyptians were becoming international players. At the same time, they were getting clever with their environment. Farmers used new techniques to get better harvests. Engineers created irrigation systems. Builders learned to make more efficient structures without always going huge like the pyramids. Speaking of pyramids, yeah, they still built some, but they were smaller and more practical. The Middle Kingdom wasn't about go big or go home. It was about smart design. It's kind of like going from building mansions to building luxury apartments. Still nice, just not insane. Let's also talk about religion real quick. Pharaohs were still considered divine, but it wasn't quite as mystical as before. There was a subtle shift toward personal religion. People believed they could have a relationship with the gods, without the pharaoh being the only connection. So you start to see more little personal shrines. More prayers written on tombs. More belief that anyone could get to the afterlife if they lived a good life. Not just royals. It's a quiet but powerful change. And get this, there's even evidence that women in the Middle Kingdom gained a little more social presence. Some women owned land. Some managed estates. There are tombs showing women as educated and respected. Still a long way to go, sure, but steps were being taken. Now, I don't want to make it sound like everything was perfect. There were still problems. Internal tension. Threats from outside tribes. Famines when the Nile misbehaved. But overall, the Middle Kingdom was a solid era. So, how long did this brainy golden age last? Roughly 400 years. That's a long run for any civilization. But eventually, cracks started forming again. The later rulers lost a bit of the magic. They got lazy, or maybe just unlucky. And eventually, Egypt faced a new threat from the east, the Hyksos. But don't worry, we'll get to that soon. For now, let's just appreciate the Middle Kingdom for what it was, a time when Egypt became more than just pyramids and pharaohs. It became thoughtful, strategic, and, in many ways, modern. It wasn't the flashiest period, but it was one of the smartest. And honestly, don't we all need a comeback story like that? Coming up next, we're entering one of the weirdest and most dramatic chapters in Egyptian history. Foreign invaders. Culture clashes. New tech. And eventually, An epic resistance. Yep, we're talking about the Second Intermediate Period and the rise of the Hyksos. It's wild, messy, and full of surprises. Okay, so you're all caught up on Egypt's big comeback during the Middle Kingdom, right? They cleaned up the mess, got their house in order, and started thinking like bosses, smart rulers, good systems, even a little philosophy. Everything's back on track, but then, boom. It all hits the fan again. Yeah, Egypt just can't catch a break. Welcome to the Second Intermediate Period, a time of invasion, confusion, and one seriously awkward foreign takeover. You won't believe this part of the story. Let's rewind. Near the end of the Middle Kingdom, things start to slide again. Pharaohs are getting weaker. The central government? Not so organized anymore. Some rulers don't even last long enough to get their tombs finished, and you know what that means: opportunity. While Egypt was busy fumbling internally, people from outside were watching. Waiting. Looking for a crack in the system, and eventually, they made their move. These people were called the Hyksos. Now, let's clear something up. Hyksos isn't the name of one tribe or empire. It's kind of a catch-all term Egyptians used for a bunch of foreigners from Western Asia, mainly from places like Canaan, modern-day Israel/Palestine area. The word Hyksos means rulers of foreign lands. So yeah, the Egyptians weren't exactly thrilled about them, but here's what's wild: they didn't just show up and start swinging swords. Nope. At first, the Hyksos moved in slowly. Some came as traders. Others as immigrants. They settled in the Nile Delta up north. They brought new ideas, new tools, and honestly, some pretty cool tech. Then, when Egypt's central power totally flopped, the Hyksos went full takeover mode. They took control of the north, set up their own capital in Avaris, and declared themselves rulers of Lower Egypt. Just like that, can you imagine? Foreigners move into your country, and next thing you know, they're calling the shots, sitting on thrones, and writing laws in your land. That's what Egypt was dealing with. Now here's the thing: people often assume the Hyksos came in, burned everything, and were all doom and gloom. But it wasn't exactly like that. Yes, it was a takeover. Yes, Egyptians hated it. But the Hyksos weren't just violent conquerors. They actually admired a lot about Egypt. They copied Egyptian customs, used Egyptian titles, even worshipped some Egyptian gods, like, hey, we're your new rulers, but also, your culture is kinda awesome. It's like showing up to someone's house party, kicking them out, but still using their Spotify playlist. Still, Egyptians weren't happy. Especially in Thebes, down south. That's where native Egyptian power still held strong. They never accepted Hyksos rule and acted like they were the real government, even if they only controlled a chunk of the country. So, for a while, Egypt was split again: north, Hyksos land; south, Egyptian resistance; and in between, tension, awkwardness, occasional skirmishes. But things got spicy when Theban rulers started pushing back. One of the most famous moments is the story of Seqenenretau, a Theban king who may or may not have died in battle against the Hyksos. His mummy shows gruesome head wounds, like he got ambushed or attacked during a fight. It's brutal. And kind of legendary, his sons picked up the fight after him, especially Kamose, who led campaigns north to chip away at Hyksos control. Kamose was bold, aggressive, and he knew Egypt couldn't move forward until the foreigners were out. But it wasn't until Ahmose I, Kamose's younger brother, came along that things really turned. Ahmose was young when he took the throne. But this guy had vision. He reorganized the army, built ships, trained soldiers, and, bit by bit, launched a full-blown campaign to kick the Hyksos out of Egypt. And guess what? It worked. Around 1550, before the Common Era, Ahmose captured Avaris, the Hyksos capital, and chased them all the way out of the country. Cue the applause. It wasn't just a military win, it was a national victory. After years of humiliation and division, Egypt was whole again, and not just whole, it was angry, motivated, and ready to make sure no one ever did that to them again. But before we get into what happened next, and it's epic, let's take a minute to think about what life was like during this crazy period. Can you imagine living through that? Your country's split in two. Foreign rulers are in charge. Your language, your religion, your culture, it's still there, but it's not in power. You probably grew up hearing about the good old days of the Middle Kingdom and thinking, why can't things be like that now? If you were living in Hyksos-controlled areas, things might not have been horrible. You could still farm, trade, and go about your day. But it wouldn't feel Egyptian. Not the way it used to. Meanwhile, if you were down in Thebes, you'd be raised on pride and resistance. Like, one day, we'll take it all back. And the people who did take it back, they weren't just seen as kings, they were heroes. Ahmose became the founder of a new dynasty, the 18th dynasty. And his victory marked the beginning of what we call the New Kingdom. But before we head there, let's talk about what the Hyksos brought to the table, because believe it or not, some of their ideas stuck around. Point one, big one? The horse-drawn chariot. Yeah, the Hyksos were the ones who introduced chariots to Egypt. Before that, Egyptian warfare was mostly on foot. But with chariots, everything changed. Speed, strategy, mobility. It was like going from walking into battle to driving a tank. They also brought improved bronze weapons, new types of bows, and different fortification designs. So while the Hyksos were hated, their influence actually helped Egypt level up militarily. Talk about a silver lining. Another thing they left behind? Trade connections. The Hyksos were plugged into the Near East. So after they were kicked out, Egypt kept those routes open, and started expanding them even more. In a weird way, the Hyksos made Egypt stronger in the long run, but emotionally, culturally, their rule left a scar. The whole Second Intermediate Period was like a national trauma. And that's why, when Egypt finally got its freedom back, it exploded into one of the most powerful, confident eras in its entire history. And yep, you guessed it, that's coming up next. The New Kingdom is where Egypt goes full superpower. Massive temples, warrior pharaohs, international drama, and names you've definitely heard before, like Hatshepsut, Akhenaten, and yes, Tutankhamun. But before we jump into that blockbuster phase, let's just take a second to respect the Egyptians who made it through the Second Intermediate Period. They survived a foreign occupation. They preserved their identity. And they came back stronger. Not bad for a civilization that had already been around for over 1,000 years at that point. So what's next? Oh, just Egypt becoming a world-dominating empire. Think pharaohs on thrones, armies marching, gold flowing, and gods getting temples the size of cities. Okay, let's talk about Cleopatra. You've heard the name. You've probably seen her in a movie or on a Halloween costume. But trust me, whatever you think you know about her, it's probably just the tip of the pyramid. Cleopatra wasn't just some pretty queen who dated powerful guys. Nope. She was the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. A queen, a strategist, a survivor. And her story? It's got everything: politics, romance, betrayal, war, and a very dramatic ending. So, let's rewind the tape. Cleopatra was born in 69 BCE into a royal family called the Ptolemies. Now, get this, they were actually Greek, not Egyptian. Yeah, for real. The Ptolemies had been ruling Egypt for about 300 years, ever since Alexander the Great and his crew rolled through town. These rulers were super Greek about everything. They spoke Greek, read Greek, and kept their bloodlines pure through family marriages. Weird, I know. But Cleopatra? She was different. She said, "Hey, if I'm gonna rule Egypt, I should probably act like an Egyptian." She learned the Egyptian language, dressed like an Egyptian goddess, and even styled herself after Isis, one of the most important goddesses in Egyptian mythology. Smart move, right? She wasn't just trying to look the part, she was connecting with her people. She got it. That already made her stand out big time. But let's talk about how she actually got the crown. When her father, Ptolemy XII, who had the charming nickname Aletes, meaning flute player, died, Cleopatra was 18. She was supposed to co-rule with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. Yeah, 10. As you can imagine, that didn't go super well. They started off ruling together, but before long, things went south. Power struggles, bad advisors, typical royal drama. Eventually, Cleopatra was kicked out of Alexandria and basically had to flee for her life. Can you imagine that? One day you're queen, the next you're crashing at someone's guest house outside the city. But Cleopatra wasn't the type to just give up. Oh no! She bided her time. Then came one of the most epic plot twists in history. Julius Caesar arrives in Alexandria in 48 BCE. He's in Egypt for political reasons. Rome's dealing with its own drama back home, but Cleopatra sees an opportunity. She wants to meet Caesar privately. But how do you do that when your brother's people are guarding the palace? Well, according to legend, she had herself rolled up in a rug and smuggled into Caesar's quarters. Not a scroll, not a letter, a queen in a rug. Like, what? That's some Hollywood-level entrance right there. And it worked. Caesar was instantly intrigued. She was clever, charming, and knew how to hold her own. And that's saying something, because Caesar wasn't exactly easy to impress. They ended up forming an alliance, both political and romantic. She was about 21, he was in his 50s. Age gap? Yep. But it worked for them. Together, they defeated her brother's forces, and Cleopatra became queen again, this time without having to share the throne. She and Caesar even had a son, Caesar Ion, which literally means Little Caesar, no connection to pizza, sadly. Now here's the deal, Cleopatra was thinking ahead. She didn't just want to keep her throne. She wanted power for her son. Maybe even a future where Egypt and Rome were ruled together by her family. Pretty bold, right? So, she goes to Rome. Lives in one of Caesar's houses. Stirs up a whole bunch of gossip. Romans were like, who does this woman think she is? She's wearing gold, she's got a crown, and she's not Roman. You can imagine the shade being thrown. Then, boom. Caesar gets assassinated in 44 BCE. ET2, brute. Now Cleopatra's stuck. She packs up and heads back to Egypt, but she's not done playing the game. This is where Mark Antony comes in. Mark Antony was one of Caesar's top guys, and he was now one of the 3 men running Rome. In 41 BCE, he called Cleopatra to meet with him. He was expecting tribute, maybe a polite diplomatic chat. But Cleopatra? She shows up in a golden boat, dressed as the goddess Isis, with perfumes in the air and musicians playing. Total spectacle. Antony was hooked. And that was it. They fell for each other hard. They partied like rock stars. They had 3 children. They ruled their part of the Mediterranean like it was their personal kingdom. Antony even gave Cleopatra a chunk of Roman land, which freaked Rome out big time. Meanwhile, back in Rome, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, was building up power. And he saw Cleopatra as a massive threat. Not just because she was queen of Egypt, but because she was influencing Antony, one of Rome's top leaders. So Octavian starts a PR campaign. He tells the Roman people, Antony's gone soft. He's obsessed with this foreign queen. He's giving our land to her and their illegitimate children. Scandal, right? Eventually, it all leads to war. In 31 BCE, Antony and Cleopatra face off against Octavian's forces in the Battle of Actium. It's a naval battle, and things go south fast. Cleopatra and Antony retreat to Egypt, totally defeated. From there, the tragedy only grows. Back in Alexandria, rumors start flying. Antony hears Cleopatra's dead and is so heartbroken that he falls on his sword. But plot twist, she's still alive. He's taken to her, bleeding out, and dies in her arms. Heart-wrenching stuff. Cleopatra knows what's coming next. Octavian's going to take her to Rome and show her off like a trophy. And Cleopatra? She's not about to let that happen. She prepares her tomb, surrounds herself with her treasures, and ends her life, probably by poison, though the famous ASP story still makes for good drama. And just like that, Cleopatra's gone. Egypt becomes part of the Roman Empire. Her son Caesar is killed. And the great era of the Pharaohs is officially over. So yeah, Cleopatra's death marked the end of ancient Egypt as an independent power. But her story? It never really ended. Let's pause for a sec and ask, would you survive in Cleopatra's Egypt? Honestly? Probably not. First off, no AC, think about it. Alexandria was hot, and the desert? Brutal. People today melt in mild heat waves. And don't even get me started on clothing. No stretchy jeans or soft hoodies. Just linen wraps and sandals. Plus, let's talk hygiene. Ancient Egyptian royalty had servants to bathe them in perfumes galore, but it wasn't exactly a spa day. Sanitation? Questionable. Medical care? Basically spells, herbs, and the occasional leech. And politics? Oh man. Royal life was a constant chess match. Every dinner party could end with poison. Everyone smiled to your face but might be plotting behind your back. Honestly, most of us would be toast by the end of week 1. Still, the drama, the intrigue, the history, it's irresistible. Cleopatra didn't just sit on a throne and look pretty. She navigated some of the most powerful empires in history. She spoke multiple languages, ruled during chaos, and took control of her own destiny in a world full of men trying to write her story for her. Here's what I think: she wasn't perfect. She made bold moves, some bad bets, and got tangled in a dangerous game. But she played it better than most, and she left a legacy that's still alive thousands of years later. Pretty epic, right? Alright, now you're probably wondering, how did Cleopatra's Egypt go from royal palaces and golden boats, to being buried under sand, only to be dug up by European explorers? Oh, we're getting to that. We'll jump way forward in time, to Napoleon's arrival in Egypt, the discovery of the Rosetta Stone, and the absolute madness of tomb raiding and the birth of modern Egyptology. Seriously, people went wild over ancient Egypt. You won't believe how much drama came from digging up a few tombs. Alright, so we just wrapped up Cleopatra's roller coaster of a life, full of power moves, Roman drama, and a tragic ending that sealed the fate of ancient Egypt. But here's the thing, Egypt didn't just vanish after Cleopatra. The land stayed the same: sandy deserts, ancient ruins, mysterious tombs, but its spotlight faded. For a long time, Egypt was just kind of there. People knew about the pyramids, sure. They were hard to miss. But nobody really got ancient Egypt anymore, and then? Boom! Egypt made the biggest comeback since vinyl records. Let me walk you through how a bunch of 18th and 19th century explorers, scholars, and even treasure hunters helped turn Egypt into the world's favorite ancient civilization. You won't believe how it all started. So, picture this, it's 1798. Napoleon Bonaparte, the short guy with big ambitions, is marching around Europe, trying to conquer basically everything. Then, out of nowhere, he decides, you know what? Let's invade Egypt. Why? Well, partly to mess with the British. But also, Napoleon thought Egypt was mysterious and powerful, and he wanted a piece of that magic. Here's the twist though, Napoleon didn't just bring soldiers. He brought scholars, too. Over 150 scientists, engineers, historians, and artists. This was the start of something big. These brainy folks were like, okay, sure, we're in the middle of a military campaign, but wow, have you seen this temple? They started measuring, sketching, and documenting everything, the pyramids, statues, ruins, even random pottery shards. This turned into a massive project called the Description de l'Egypte, and it was one of the first real deep dives into Egypt's past. Napoleon's military campaign? Total mess. He got defeated and left Egypt in a hurry, but the curiosity he sparked? Oh, it exploded. Now here comes one of the biggest plot twists in archaeology ever, the discovery of the Rosetta Stone. You've probably heard of it. It's not just the name of a language app. This thing literally unlocked the ancient Egyptian language. Here's how it went down. In 1799, a French soldier found this black slab of rock near the town of Rosetta, modern-day Rashid. It had writing on it, 3 different scripts, Greek, Demotic, and hieroglyphs. The cool part? All 3 were saying the same thing. That was the jackpot. Why did that matter? Well, nobody had been able to read hieroglyphs for about 1,400 years. They were just mysterious little pictures, snakes, birds, eyeballs, and nobody knew what they meant. Total mystery language, but now? Scholars had the same message in a language they could read, Greek in 2 they couldn't. It was like finding a decoder ring in your cereal box. Enter Jean-François Champollion, a French linguist with serious dedication. This guy worked on the Rosetta Stone for years. He compared the Greek and hieroglyphs line by line, sound by sound. And in 1822? Boom! He cracked it. Hieroglyphs weren't just pretty pictures, they were a full-on writing system, with sounds, symbols, and grammar. Can you imagine how mind-blowing that was? Suddenly, ancient Egypt could speak again. All those tomb walls, scrolls, and monuments? They finally made sense, and just like that, Egyptology, the study of ancient Egypt, was born. Now, here's where things get kinda wild. The 1800s roll around, and Europeans are officially Egypt-obsessed. Like, full-on fandom. Rich travelers and royals start making trips to Egypt just to see the ruins. Artists paint exotic scenes of temples and camels. Egyptian motifs show up in fashion, furniture, even garden fountains. You know how everyone today is into crystals and astrology? That was how Egypt felt to them, mystical, magical, and a little spooky. But not all of this attention was great. A lot of European collectors weren't just admiring Egypt, they were taking it. Tombs were opened, artifacts dug up, and statues shipped back home. Museums in London, Paris, and Berlin started filling up with Egyptian treasures. And here's the kicker, some of these explorers were more like treasure hunters. They weren't doing careful archaeology, they were blasting open tombs with dynamite. Seriously. Can you imagine showing up to an ancient temple and just blowing a hole in the wall? Total chaos. Still, this period gave us some huge discoveries, and one of the most iconic came in the early 1900s. Let me set the scene. It's 1922. Egypt is crawling with archaeologists, adventurers, and rich British guys funding digs like it's the hottest new sport. One of those guys? Lord Carnarvon. He teams up with a British archaeologist named Howard Carter, who's been obsessed with finding the tomb of a little-known pharaoh named Tutankhamun, aka King Tut. Most people thought the Valley of the Kings had already given up all its secrets. But Carter? He wasn't giving up. He kept digging and digging until, bam, they found steps leading down into the sand. What happened next? Absolute legend. Carter opens the tomb, peeks in, and Lord Carnarvon asks, "Can you see anything?" And Carter replies, "Yes. Wonderful things." And he wasn't exaggerating. The tomb of King Tut was packed. Golden statues, jeweled thrones, chariots, and that iconic gold burial mask. Unlike most tombs, it hadn't been totally looted. It was like a time capsule straight from 3,000 years ago. People around the world went nuts. Newspapers printed photos of the treasures. Museums had Egypt-themed exhibits. King Tut became a superstar, even though he ruled for less than a decade and died at around 18 years old. Wild, right? Oh, and remember the curse of the Pharaohs? That legend started here too. After opening the tomb, Lord Carnarvon died suddenly from an infected mosquito bite. The press ran with it. The mummy's curse strikes. It made the whole discovery feel even more mysterious. Was there really a curse? Probably not. But it made for a great story, and it helped lock Egypt's place in modern pop culture. Let's get real for a second. A lot of the stuff taken from Egypt during the 19th and early 20th centuries? It didn't exactly go through customs. Statues, mummies, obelisks, they were taken without Egypt's permission and are still sitting in European and American museums. That sparked some serious debate. Egypt's government has been pushing to get many of these artifacts returned. It's a heated topic in the museum world. Who owns history? The people who found it, or the people whose ancestors made it? It's tricky. On one hand, the world got to see and learn about Egypt because of those discoveries. On the other hand, well, imagine someone came into your house, took your great-grandma's heirlooms, and put them in a glass case overseas. You'd want them back too, right? The conversation is still ongoing, and every year, more people are talking about the ethics of archaeology and museum collections. Despite all the drama, colonialism, tomb raiding, the curse of the pharaohs, Egypt still captures the world's imagination. And honestly, that's kind of amazing. Kids learn about the pyramids in school and instantly become obsessed. Movies like The Mummy and Indiana Jones still get rewatched a million times. Designers, game makers, and musicians use Egyptian symbols all the time. Even pop stars love it. Remember when Katy Perry dressed like Cleopatra in a music video? Or when Beyoncé wore an Egyptian queen-inspired outfit at Coachella? Yep. Egypt stays trendy. The architecture, the art, the mystery, it all just feels timeless. And the cool part? We're still discovering new things. Every year, archaeologists uncover more tombs, temples, and secrets hidden under the sands. Some are using high-tech tools like satellite imaging and ground-penetrating radar. Others are still brushing away dust one grain at a time. So, ancient Egypt? It's not frozen in time. It's still alive, in our imaginations, in museums, and sometimes even in the news. And speaking of being alive, in a lot of ways, the answer is yes. We'll look at how Egyptian culture pops up in language, buildings, memes, tattoos, basically everywhere. you'll be surprised how often ancient Egypt sneaks into modern life. But now, let's ask something kind of fun. Is ancient Egypt still alive today? At first, that sounds like a no, right? I mean, pharaohs are gone. There are no more giant pyramids going up in the desert. Nobody's walking around in gold collars and eyeliner, at least not daily. But if you look closer, really pay attention, Egypt never left us. In fact, ancient Egypt is everywhere. It's in our language. It's in movies. It's in the buildings we pass by. It's even in tattoos and TikToks. So, yeah. It's not just history, it's culture that still lives on. Let's break it down. You know how people say, it's all Greek to me? Well, sometimes, it's Egyptian. You won't believe this, but ancient Egyptian didn't completely die out. Over time, it evolved into something called Coptic, which is still used today in the Egyptian Christian Church. That's like the great-great-great-grandchild of the hieroglyphs. Now, we don't walk around speaking Coptic in daily life, but the language left some traces, especially in words. Take the word chemistry. Ever wonder where that came from? It's actually linked to Kemet, the ancient name for Egypt. It means the black land, referring to the rich soil near the Nile. So yeah, every time you hear someone say chemistry, they're sort of whispering the word Egypt without realizing it. Ancient Egypt in architecture, yep, it's everywhere. Okay, let's talk buildings for a sec. Ever seen a bank, courthouse, or museum with huge columns and that temple vibe? That's not a coincidence. That's ancient Egypt showing off again. After Napoleon's Egyptian campaign, Europe and America went Egypt crazy. This led to something called the Egyptian Revival movement. Basically, architects decided pyramids and sphinxes were cool and started adding them to modern designs. There's even a cemetery in Brooklyn, New York with a full-on Egyptian-style gate and obelisks. Some Masonic lodges? Total ancient Egyptian aesthetic. The Washington Monument? Big OL obelisk. Straight out of Pharaoh 101. And if you've ever stayed at the Luxor Hotel in Las Vegas, you've basically slept inside a modern pyramid. It even has a giant sphinx out front. So ancient Egypt didn't just inspire ancient builders. It's still shaping skylines. Pop culture can't get enough. Now this one's obvious, but worth talking about. Ancient Egypt might just be the most stylish civilization ever. The look? The mystery? The symbolism? It's catnip for pop culture. Let's start with movies. From 1932's The Mummy to Brendan Fraser's 1999 version to the more recent Tom Cruise reboot, Egypt is Hollywood gold. TV shows? Tons of them. Cartoons, anime, sci-fi, documentaries. Even Yu-Gi-Oh! Had ancient Egyptian lore. And don't even get me started on video games. Assassin's Creed, Origins literally let you walk around ancient Egypt. Explore temples. Ride camels. Climb pyramids. It was gorgeous. Fashion? Beyoncé wore a Queen Nefertiti look that broke the internet. Katy Perry went full Cleopatra in Dark Horse. Rihanna's rocked Egyptian goddess-style photo shoots. Ancient Egypt is straight up iconic. And here's the coolest part, people still wear ankh necklaces, get Eye of Horus tattoos, and decorate with pyramid symbols, not just because they look cool, but because they still mean something. They represent life, protection, mystery, and power. So ancient Egypt is basically the OG influencer. Now, this is a juicy one. Even though ancient Egyptian religion isn't practiced anymore, a lot of its ideas still echo in today's beliefs and stories. Think about this. The ancient Egyptians believed in a judgment day. After you died, your heart was weighed against the feather of truth. If your heart was light, awesome. If it was heavy, yikes. You'd get eaten by a demon creature with a crocodile head. It's not too far off from concepts in other religions about heaven, judgment, and the afterlife. They weren't just powerful, they were personal. People had home altars. They prayed, made offerings, and asked for help with daily stuff. Love, sickness, farming, you name it. That mix of magic and real life? It's something people still crave today. That's why modern spiritual movements love Egyptian symbols. The ankh for eternal life. The scarab for rebirth. The eye of Ra for protection. It's not just aesthetics, it's spiritual energy people still connect with. Let's be honest, museums would be way less exciting without Egypt. The Egyptian wing is always one of the busiest. People love seeing mummies, golden masks, and weird tools from 3,000 years ago. They stare at the hieroglyphs like they're trying to crack a code. And let's not forget all the documentaries. History Channel, Nat Geo, Netflix, YouTube. There's always a new special on secrets of the Pharaohs or lost tombs of the Nile. People still want to know more. How were the pyramids built? Who were the real rulers behind the throne? What's still buried under the sand? We're not just fascinated, we're kind of obsessed. Why? Maybe it's the mix of science, mystery, and glamour. Or maybe we just love the idea that humans were capable of amazing things thousands of years ago, even without smartphones or Starbucks. And now, TikTok Egyptologists? Okay, this is fun. There's a new wave of young archaeologists and historians using social media to share Egypt's story. They're making videos from dig sites, doing live Q&As about mummies, and explaining hieroglyphs in under 60 seconds. It's kind of like Cleopatra meets content creator. And honestly, it's awesome. They're keeping the history alive, not in dusty books, but in reels, posts, and memes. Even Gen Z is getting pulled into ancient Egypt, one scroll at a time. So yeah, the legacy's still growing. Let's be real, most of us wouldn't survive ancient Egypt. Now for a fun reality check. As cool as ancient Egypt sounds, let's be honest, most of us today wouldn't last a week in that world. Seriously. No Wi-Fi. No air conditioning. No painkillers. You got a toothache? Better hope the village priest has some magic spells or you're chewing on herbs. And the Nile? Yeah, it was beautiful, but also full of crocodiles, hippos, and diseases. Yum! Food was mostly bread, beer, onions, and more bread. Not exactly DoorDash friendly. Clothes? Light linen, sure. But no pockets. No sneakers. No deodorant. Hot. And don't forget, everything was manual labor. Want to build a house? Grab a brick. Want water? Walk to the river. Want shade? Good luck. Plus, if you said the wrong thing about the pharaoh, boom. Off with your head. So while ancient Egypt is super fascinating, let's just say, thank goodness for the 21st century. Still, can you imagine walking into a temple lit by torches, with painted walls and gold statues everywhere? Just for a moment? Total goosebumps.so. Is ancient Egypt still alive? Absolutely. Not in the way it once was, no more pharaohs or pyramids under construction, but in the way it inspires us. It's in the art we make, the stories we tell, the dreams we have. It reminds us that humans, no matter the time period, are curious, creative, and a little mysterious. Ancient Egypt left us wisdom, beauty, and big questions we're still trying to answer. How did they build the pyramids so precisely? What were their daily lives really like? And what secrets are still waiting underground? Those questions keep us digging. Keep us watching. Keep us wondering. And that's what keeps Egypt alive. So next time you see a pyramid, an Eye of Horus tattoo, or even a cat staring at you like it owns the world, just remember. The spirit of ancient Egypt? Still here. Still watching. Still totally epic. See you next time, history lovers.